Okay, we are going to go ahead and get this meeting started. We have got 4 of us. We'll do an official attendance here in just a moment, but that's enough just for a quorum is when we have 4, so we're good to go. So we are called to order, and let's do our attendance. Steve Ball. I'm Chad Huffman. I'm here. Let's see, Phoebe Binzinger and Richard Rogers. And so we are missing tonight David Fishering, Ron Carnes, and Delphine. There we go. But again, we have our quorum of 4, so we're good to go. Jace or William, do we have any changes to the agenda?
There are none.
Great. Okay, well, I will go ahead and turn it over to you guys with our first and only item.
Approval of the minutes.
Right. Okay, she's keeping me on track. We've got to do the minutes from last week, or last meeting. So, has everybody had a chance to review, and/or does somebody want to give a motion associated with approving the minutes?
I move to approve as presented.
Second. Sounds good. All those in favor? Aye. And those opposed? So it passes 4-0. It's approved. Okay, back to William. Go for it.
I'm having some computer troubles right now, so please just give me a moment.
We went too fast. I'm sorry. Give me paper. Medium long. Jace, while he's working on that, do you want to give us a briefing on how is the revised land use plan rules going? When should we expect something?
Yeah, I'll look to, is this an appropriate time, you think, Chris, to just provide a quick update in the interim?
If you'd like, I don't quite know where we're at with it.
Sure. Yeah, no, happy to, as far as the land use code update, yeah, so we had an open house a couple of weeks ago. I know some of our planning commission did make it to that, so very much appreciate that support. It is still plugging along. Generally, code update processes like the one we're going with here are multi-year ventures. And so this one has been in the making for a bit, and so we're just now getting kind of some real formalized red lines, working with our consultant team on that specifically. And then what we'll see out of that is actually some of those published here in probably about a month or so as to some of the red lines proposed. And then moving forward, we'll have another open house and then proceed with planning commission, council. It'll go directly to council. That said, we'll provide planning commission constant updates on it. So with that, it looks like we're on track still to finish by about fall for the housing component, and then the non-housing related items likely in kind of the latter part of the year, possibly early 2025. So actually on track, which is great. Other jurisdictions I've worked for, it has taken, it generally takes about a year longer than proposed. So we're excited.
Thank you for that update. William, did we delay enough?
Just in time.
Perfect.
My apologies. Always some IT issue that comes up at these. This project is being called the Eagle Ranch South Preliminary Plat, which is located on 2 properties consisting of 3.8 acres. This is just to the north of Oak Grove Road and to the south of Cook Drive and what is currently Eagle Ranch Lane. The property is zoned R2 Low Density District, and the proposal would consist of 6 single-family residential lots. I do know the packet says 8 in a few places. That is a typo. The plat itself does show 6 residential lots, as well as an outlot for future development. The surrounding zoning is also R2 Low Density District to the north, R3A Medium High Density District to the east and the west, and property outside of city limits to the south. The R2 zoning does allow for single-family residential uses. You may also notice that there's a small bit in the southern portion of the property that's zoned R3A, Medium High Density District. However, that is part of the outlot, and this plat does not propose any lots in this piece of the property. This is our subdivision process, which must first begin with a sketch plan, and that took place in early 2022. The preliminary plat must be brought before the Planning Commission and City Council for approval, and this document is what permits a developer to begin infrastructure improvements. Once infrastructure is in place and approved by the city, an applicant can submit a final plat, which is what formally creates individual lots that can be purchased. These are our subdivision review standards, which are also included at length in the packet. The proposal should be consistent with the master plan, city subdivision and zoning regulation standards, and other applicable ordinances. The subdivision should also be reviewed for the relationship of the development to topography, soils, drainage, flooding, potential hazard areas, and other physical characteristics. The subdivision should also be reviewed for the availability of water, means of sewage collection and treatment, stormwater drainage, access to other utilities and services, the compatibility with the natural environment, wildlife, vegetation, and unique natural features, adjacent streets and traffic flow, including pedestrian access, availability of fire, police, and other emergency services protection, and the impacts on area schools. The property is shown as residential mixed density low in the future land use map, which suggests that the area is appropriate for single-family homes, but also potentially some small amounts of attached residential development, such as duplexes or townhomes. The R2 zoning district is intended to provide for development of single-family residences, along with certain other compatible land uses. The proposed single-family houses are a use by right in R2. And then here's the subdivision plat itself. I know that this is very small on these screens here, but this is available in the public packet for tonight online. It's much easier to see on there. As you can see, this plat proposes 6 lots at the end of a proposed cul-de-sac. One note about the cul-de-sac, by virtue of the developer's request for a different street layout from what had previously been approved, the existing Eagle Ranch Lane would need to be renamed to Cook Drive, and unfortunately that would require 2 address changes. This is a requirement from emergency services and 911 operations. Street names are not just arbitrary. There is a system that does have to be followed, and all road proposals do get reviewed by EMS. This is for navigational purposes for emergency responders. The road names do provide an indication of directionality and connectivity in the network. I know it might not seem like much, but being able to identify how the road connects to the network can save minutes or seconds in a life or death situation. So if E911 coordinators do request a road name change, that decision is not taken lightly, but it is in the best interest of the public health, safety, and welfare. Here are the utility plans. Scott may have some more things to say about this, but this is also reviewed during the subdivision process and is included as a part of the application, though this page is not specifically printed on Mylar as a recordable document. As I said before, the preliminary plat permits an applicant to begin infrastructure improvements which need to be in place before lots can be conveyed. In summary, staff finds that the application is in order and is in compliance with subdivision regulations. The proposal meets the intent of the R2 zoning district. Staff recommends the conditional approval of the Eagle Ranch South preliminary plat with the standard condition that we recommend for all preliminary plats as shown on this slide. That concludes my presentation. Scott, do you have anything to add?
I think just real quick on the infrastructure side, so this one's relatively small, but still gets the full gamut of sewer, water, fire protection, traffic, geotechnical, drainage. This one's kind of got its own little drainage pond specific to this cul-de-sac.
We can't hear you, Scott.
Oh, sorry. So all that's been reviewed and approved through the process. Works every time. And so, yeah, happy to answer any questions that come up, but just because it's small, it still goes through all of that process, and it has been approved. So, and they would still go to construction, get inspected. Once constructed satisfactorily, then they would come forward with the final plat, but only after all the infrastructure is accepted by the city.
Okay, and with that, the applicant is here. I would ask him to please step forward, state your name and address, and add anything that you'd like to say.
My name is Al Rubish, spelled H-R-U-B-E-S, 742 Lab Court, Grand Junction, and I don't have anything to add.
Stick around. Commission, do you have any questions for staff or the applicant?
Do we
Yes.
So, William, let's pretend this is my very first planning commission meeting ever, because obviously I got lost in the sketch plan. Is this is part of a three-part process that started in 2022?
Correct.
And so, and then he has 5 years from 2022 to finalize this, right?
The sketch plan does not have an expiration date, the preliminary plat does.
Okay.
So the preliminary plat is a 5-year expiration date. If a final plat is not approved and recorded within that 5 years, then the applicant would need to come back with a amended preliminary plat, which is still called amended even if it's the exact same.
Okay, so on step number 1 of this preliminary plat, were there any recommendations made that you've taken into consideration for where we are now, or no? Or am I just totally confused?
There was a sketch plan review, admittedly, it was a while ago.
In 2022?
In 2022. Yep.
Okay, and so from that, were there any recommendations made, or, I mean, because we don't have privy to that. I mean, normally, we can remember and we can see like, oh yeah, we said to address the irrigation or blah, 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 and we see that you've done that. So were there any recommendations made and they've all been addressed? We can just assume that? Is that correct?
So there were certainly recommendations made. None of the recommendations are binding. As you
Right.
know, it is a sketch plan. That was a sketch plan application. Sketch plan reviews are informal and non-binding.
Sure.
And so that, Jace has something to add?
Yeah, exactly right. Is this one working? Hopefully. Like William's saying, non-binding. I would actually look to the applicant from that sketch plan if he had made any real revisions or changes based on the recommendations at time of planning commission and the recommendations as he's met with the public. So maybe probably a better question to ask perhaps for the applicant themselves.
All right, so has anything changed at all from your original sketch plan that you submitted to the city in 2022? Is this the same one? Besides
No.
the change of the road, the name of the street?
There was changes and revisions, but we worked with the city with William and with the Public Works and to adjust and make what was the requirements at the time.
And that those requirements at the time are still the same requirements as of today, right?
I would say they're all current
Okay.
because we've adjusted everything to what the city has required.
Okay. I mean, and I hate to just beat this horse to death, fellow commissioner meetings, but normally it's in my head, you know what you saw, you heard, and so then when they come back for number 2, so we weren't there for that one, or I wasn't there for that, so I'm just asking, just for my own sake, if there's something we're missing here that we need to address tonight, but it doesn't sound like there was or is. Yeah.
I would say that, yeah, you're right. It was a while ago. But more important, we're addressing this meeting today to make sure that we are comfortable with it today, moving forward from today. And so even if we made some dramatic recommendations, as long as we're comfortable with it today and it's meeting all the various different codes, the code criteria that is in place today, then we're good to go to proceed from today forward. Now, we're not proceeding until we hear from our audience also, but that's the criteria, is are we comfortable as of today moving forward? So, did we kind of answer your question? Okay.
Yes, I'm curious to see what the public has to say.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So-
Roger, you had a question?
Yeah.
Yes. On the Outlot A, are there any preliminary plans for that
No.
at this time? And then a question for staff. If development is proposed for Outlot A, they would have to come back to the planning commission?
Correct, if it was a subdivision, or.
Would be amending the preliminary plat or the final
Correct.
plat? Yeah.
Correct.
In the future?
Yes.
Right, okay.
If it was a simple site development, that's administrative, but if it's a subdivision, it would need to come back as a plat before the planning commission.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
One thing I'll mention too, just I pulled up the sketch plan just to refresh everyone's memory here a little bit. And within that sketch plan, the proposal was actually for 8 lots, it would appear. So it's actually been pared down to 6 as you see proposed. And so a slight difference there, I think, from a visual standpoint, and not a whole lot has changed. Obviously, as you go from sketch to preliminary, that's when you really dial in your infrastructure plans and your engineering plans. And so there was likely some slight modifications seen from that, but biggest change, pared down from 8 to 6, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jace. Sir, you can go ahead and have a seat, and I will open up, yeah, you're good, go ahead and have a seat. I will open up our public comment period. During our public comment period, yes, you're going to step forward, you're going to state your name, your address, you're going to present your questions to us, and we will then present questions back to the applicant. But please don't address the applicant, please address the commission with your questions. So whoever would like to come forward.
Different vision. My name is Dave Stockton. I live at 3009 Cook Drive. I'm here to express my concerns regarding the proposed Eagle Ranch South subdivision. I'm glad you guys clarified 6 versus 8 because that was one of my concerns. But my main concern is surface or stormwater drainage. The existing design is not adequate to properly drain surface water during or after a storm. Water runoff from Cook Drive and Meadows Parkway accumulates at the intersection of Sarah E. Lane and Cook Drive. That area is filled with overgrown vegetation and is not maintained. It's unclear as to who is responsible for the maintenance, whether it's the city or the property owner. Regardless, the surface water drainage issue needs to be rectified before any additional homes are built, compounding the issue. Another concern of mine is financial viability. The applicant, also known as Cash Development, filed bankruptcy during the 2007-2008 economic downturn in the market. If that were to occur again, my concern is abandoned properties in the middle of construction. There's currently a bunch of construction residue on Lot A, Outlot A, that's been there for 16 years. So if the applicant were to file bankruptcy again, I don't want to see a bunch of construction debris laying around our subdivision. Thank you.
Question for you, sir. When you talk about the drainage, are you talking about the drainage when you first drive into the Fox Meadow subdivision, the big area that's right before the mailboxes on kind of the west of the mailboxes?
If you look at the plat, so let's see, from lot 1, let's see, from lot 5, it comes back around in front of my property and collects right.
Do you mind just stepping up?
You should have this.
I know. And Scott, do you mind joining me? Just so you can see what he's talking about?
I'm aware, yeah, I can show you.
Okay. Explain that.
All right. So Surrey Lane's here, and this is, so Meadows Parkway's up here, Surrey Lane, and there's some vacant land here.
Yes.
And there's a little pit there, I don't know if it's supposed to be a holding pond or not. There's overgrown with shrubbery and trees and whatnot. So the water comes down this way and just collects there.
Okay.
Got a 77-year-old wife's out there shoveling gravel and stuff, try to break that up. You can't have that going on.
Thank you. Good explanation.
Thank you.
And I can speak to that when the time comes.
Beautiful. Thank you, Scott. Next, who would like to also speak? Ma'am, come on up, identify yourself by name and with address, and tell us your concerns or your comments.
My name is Lynn Stockton. I reside at 3009 Cook Drive. I'd like to expand upon what my husband just said. Item number 1, the holding pond that Rubish installed is not a holding pond. It's Sarah E. Lane and Cook Drive intersection. It is 2 parcels that belong to Judge Brown, who purchased the pasture west of the subdivision along 6700. There is no drainage provided. Item number 2, we have legal written agreements from both Al Rubish and Rick Brown, that we are excluded from any HOA. Number 3, ask the manager of the cost of the city incurred to remove said debris from the easement. The Rubishes were taken to court and fined for code violations on their parcel. Finally, we ask that any infrastructure, building equipment, vehicles gain entrance and exit from the Oak Grove access location, which is vacant land, utilizing the city easement, hopefully, or the Uncompadre Water District, and saving money thereby not having to repave Cook Drive that was recently paved. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Go ahead.
My name is Joanne Thomas. I live at 67231 Ogden Road, fairly close to the property, but not next door. I realize Montrose needs houses. That's not my issue. My issue is in general, not with this particular thing, but in general, of the traffic that goes on 6700 Road, especially now that it's a through bypass to Highway 50, and Ogden Road, because development is occurring everywhere. And I know we need it, but I'm concerned that they're not providing enough attention to the roads for the future, and it's getting worse. That's my comment.
Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else? So once we close the public comment portion, we're done with any more public comments. So yep, this is your last chance.
I'm Steve Yelton with Rocky Mountain Surveying, and I live at 2816 Primrose Court here in Montrose. I would like Scott Murphy to address the drainage issue because we've done some extensive planning and some proposed catch basins to take a lot of the water to the south and into a retention pond before it goes into the drainage ditch. So not all these lots are going to drain to the north and cause more problems. And I was waiting to see if Scott was going to address that, but.
Okay. We
I
will
would
talk
just
about
like him
drainage
to do
once
it.
we're done with all the public comment portion.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
last chance from anybody else who wants to provide any comments? Okay, I'm going to close the public comment portion. Scott, would you like the hot seat first?
Certainly. Yeah, and can I steal the screen sharing? Just to help everybody visualize it here. Yeah, so on the drainage side, so yeah, we're aware of this one. We're aware of it through their design and made sure their design accommodated it. So I'll run through how that's been addressed. So kind of the original, I can't remember I think Cook annexation area here. This whole area was originally kind of master planned as one with road connections down and across, lining up with Paint and Drive. The bottom kind of fell out of the market with the housing bust in the mid-2000s, and the properties had since parsed up into different ownership. So when they built the original, I think this is East Sarah Lane here, and this first filing, they intended for the drainage from this road to come and then eventually end up in a detention pond in grade here towards the south. So they built it there knowing that it was going to stop and then come at, or get extended to a future date and go to a detention pond. Obviously, we wouldn't do things that way these days, but that's how they did it back in the 2000s. It's a relatively small drainage area. It's capturing, just these roads here. But yeah, they're correct. It kind of creates what they did is a interim depression area here. You can kind of see the scar on the aerial. And over time, that's just kind of silted up and kind of become just a subtle depression at best. What's kind of unique about it is it's not on city property. And it's not on the Rubish's property either. This is owned by a different parcel owner. We were actually working on some plat cleanup with them. We're aware of this issue and have it written into their revised, kind of cleaned up platting to make sure that all of this is addressed as continued build out occurs. So right now it's a small collective area, but if that lots of roads were to be added to that, that would become an even worse problem. And so, long range as those areas develop and within their, within the city's control, because right now it's not even on our property, we ask to see and have work to secure to make sure that gets addressed and remedied when development occurs. For the development that's being proposed here, so their property starts at this pink line at the end of the existing pavement. Everything, this is their civil plan. So again, with their plans, with their plat, they have to provide plans for all their drainage, piping, a drainage report to demonstrate water quality and stormwater detention with the state because they were over an acre trigger. So you can't see it here on these, but all of these are the grading arrows, all go into what are going to be inlets that diagonal across the cul-de-sac. The whole cul-de-sac grades into those inlets, and then those inlets go through its own smaller detention pond, and then ultimately out to the abandoned A drain there immediately to the southeast. So all the impervious area that they're adding with the pavement and everything is self-contained. The existing road will continue to grade the way it is because it's built and it's existing. You can't really change it without fully rebuilding an existing road with existing utilities. Yeah, they aren't adding anything to it. And if we couldn't make the Rubishes fix that because it's not even on their property either. It's not on ours, it's not on theirs. And so for this development, that was a solution to make theirs self-contained and not add to that. And it's required by the state as well, the detention for water quality and all of those things. So, any questions on that?
Let me summarize what I heard you say. When it comes to the current water concern that the neighborhood is expressing, it's not on property that we can truly control at the moment? Is that the simple answer?
As a city or this developer, neither one have control over that land, correct?
I can't hear your answer.
I said neither the city nor the developer have control over the end of the Cook Drive piece where that kind of depression pond was constructed.
So does water currently stand on the road, or is it draining into that?
Both.
Depression.
So that depression area is kind of silted in over time, and so you get some spill out onto the street. Yeah.
So during a bad storm, the last 48 hours that we had, where we had quite a bit of rain, where there might be some standing water at certain times that would be on the road.
Fair guess, I haven't checked on it.
When does it get bad enough that it then becomes a uglier city issue?
We could intervene if there was, detriment to property or right-of-way. Our streets crews have gone and looked at it over the years and I think done some kind of limited work where they could.
Right.
It generally hasn't risen. It's
Right.
been a lower caliber issue that hasn't, it's not damaging property or anything
Right.
of that sort.
But most important, it has nothing to do with this development that we're hearing with today's issue. So that's what we need to center our attention on is this development.
This development is not adding to it.
Right.
And for that reason, knowing that this issue existed and does not have control over that property, so.
Thank you, Scott. Any thoughts associated with the overall condition and volume? And I know what we hear the city do is give ABC sort of grades to 6700 road or all the city roads, get kind of a grade based upon traffic. What's the current grade, to the best of your memory, for 6700?
The best reference for where we're going streets-wise and how we manage streets and capital street growth and congestion growth is really to kind of stay tuned in on our capital plan and our capital. We do a lot of presentations each year. At budget time, we talk through, where the pressures are and where we're going. They're $100 million problems, or not problems, but, backlogs and projects to be done over the next decades to stay ahead of it, and where things get prioritized to do it. So that's the vein of every city's existence, is staying ahead of growth and making sure our resources are going into the right direction. So there's no silver bullet answer to that outside of there are, capital plans to do the best we can to stay ahead with the resources we have of growth as it occurs citywide, not just specific to 6700. To some degree of specificity on 6700. The next likely big project the city will be going towards is focusing on the Rio Grande corridor. Obviously, the Woodgate roundabout's coming up this fall. 6700 will see a pretty large increase in traffic once it punches through the bridges. So right now it turns at Oak Grove. Oak Grove will extend down through the bridges, but that likely won't happen until after Rio Grande is complete. Because once you start making that connection, you'll see a lot more people come on to 6700, and you need to make sure that we can do all the roundabout intersections. Niagara and 6700 will probably be the first, and the signal at 6750, which would then become warranted once you start bringing all that volume over. That's probably at least 5 to 7 years out. For now, 6700 will stay in status quo. And one thing I can say about volume right now with Hillcrest closed, we've done counts. It's easily about a 50% increase in the reach. So once Hillcrest opens here, in July, late June, early July, you'll see a pretty significant drop in 6700 back to its kind of new base flow, post missing link.
Thank you. The prior construction rubbish that they were talking about, is that rubbish on our current land, this current development that we're talking about at this point?
I remember hearing about the stories, and legal and the police were involved back in the day. I don't know where that landed, but typically that wouldn't tie to a development.
And I'll say that isn't relevant to this at this point, simply because it's not before you today. That isn't going into any sort of the review and approval criteria. It has nothing to do with the code or what's in front of you.
Sounds good. The HOA concern. William, do you have any comments? Ultimately, when a developer is putting together a plan, is every piece of the land required to be in the HOA?
The developer can set up an HOA specific to this development. You would not be able to force another property owner to join in the HOA, unless they wanted to, of course, but it sounds like the neighbors don't. So there would not, I don't know whether there will be an HOA specific for these 6 lots, but there will not be an HOA beyond that.
And typically when you see HOAs, there's typically a reason for it, right? There's irrigation water that's tied to it. There is open space that's tied to a specific HOA. I'd look to the applicant if he plans to prepare one moving forward, but I think that would be something at time of final platting as well. Nothing that would really need to be even looked at this point in time.
Other commissioners, other questions? Any additional conversation between the commission?
The drainage situation is not able to be addressed at the moment, is the gist of what I've heard.
That is the simple summary of, yes, the drainage has nothing to do with the current land and the current development that we're looking at today.
Yeah, and just to clarify too, Scott, is this on? It is not just can that drainage not be addressed, but the way they've set up the drainage for these new units, it's not going to drain and make that worse, right? It's draining somewhere else, so, yeah.
Good. So does anybody do any of the commissioners want to give a motion in one direction or the other?
I'll make a motion. I hereby make a motion to recommend City Council approval of preliminary plat application with the following conditions. The approval of this preliminary plat is expressly conditioned upon the city staff ensuring that all policies, regulations, and ordinances and municipal code provisions are met, and that the applicant adequately addresses all of the staff's concerns prior to the execution of the final plat. City staff is not authorized by this approval to execute the final plat prior to all conditions being satisfied. The request meets the code criteria based on the evidence and testimony presented at this hearing and in the staff report.
Is there a second? Okay, we have a second. And any conversation concerning the motion? Okay. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Okay, it passes unanimously. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate all the feedback. Yep. Sir, we're going to continue on, and
We got to finish this first.
After the meeting, they have to close out.
that's okay. Will, any other agenda items for today, and/or are we going to have a meeting in 2 weeks?
There are no agenda items, no further agenda items for tonight. Remains to be seen on the June 12th Planning Commission meeting. We will let you know.
Should have a known answer tomorrow. We'll definitely be having the later June meeting, but not sure on the June 12th meeting at this point in time. So we'll keep you posted. Aside from that, I don't have anything else to add. Like I said, to give a quick update on the code, we keep plugging away at that. It's a busy time right now for, I think, building, planning, engineering, just 'tis the season. But, yeah, nothing further.
Great.
Can I add also that the county's doing their codes, their land use code, and when that's ready, that will be presented at the forum. We actually had them scheduled for July, but they just said they're not ready yet, so. Is it the code, the county land use?
They're
Yeah.
doing a major comprehensive plan
Right.
update. Yep, and that's another thing. I actually talked with the county this morning and talked about possibly doing a city-county planning commission training or meeting or something of that nature. So we'll regroup and see what that looks like and come back to you, but you'll likely be seeing that at some point in the future as well. So more to come.
Okay, motion to adjourn. And a second? And all those in favor? Aye. And we're adjourned.